This week on To the Contrary.
First, are colleges to blame for campus rape? Then, men define success in surprising ways. Behind the headlines, how a young American woman was imprisoned by an Afghan family.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, sexual assault on campus.
A new report says most colleges are doing a poor job of stopping sexual assault or helping victims. The study rated 300 colleges across the U.S. using a letter grade system. 80% received a C or below. The report by two women's groups says almost one-third of sexual assault policies did not meet federal standards. One college is already being sued for ineffective anti-rape policies. The lawsuit charges the University of Connecticut did not properly respond to sexual assault complaints lodged by 7 women. Sex crime prevention remains a very hot topic. A recent blog post continues to draw both criticism and praise for saying young women should be warned of the link between binge drinking and rape. Some believe it's sensible advice. Others say it's blaming the victim.
So, Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeever, is it sexist just to warn college women away from drinking to try to cut the number of sexual assaults?
Well, the short answer is yes. Anytime your anti-rape message is to look at the behavior of the victim versus that of the perpetrator, it's not only sexist, your whole process is not as effective as it otherwise could be.
And I'll say the short answer is no, because it's the truth. We know that women who are drinking are much more apt to be a victim of sexual assault on campus. So I think withholding any information like that is not doing them justice.
I would have to agree with Avis. I think it's completely sexist. It's completely shifting the responsibility on the victim and taking away the responsibility that the rapist has to not rape.
The short answer is no. Listen, if you leave your house unlocked, are you responsible if it gets robbed? No. But did you do everything that you could to protect yourself from getting robbed? No. And that's what we're looking at here.
But Vice President Joe Biden said this week that his analogy, you have a very good analogy, his analogy was if a guy walks out of a bar dead drunk and he gets mugged, is it his fault? No. So why should women be at fault if they get drunk and get raped?
Well, I'm not saying that they should be at fault. I want to be very clear about that. But again, there are things that they can do to stop this from happening. One of the things that they tell you to do is take different patterns when you walk home so that you're never taking the same one so that you can't get stalked. The other things that they tell you to do are take mace. And by the way, those blue lights on college campuses are completely ineffective. They are not helpful. I would not count on that if you're a young college woman to stop you from getting raped.
They also tell you to walk with a friend, do the buddy system. And a lot of the times you get raped by the person who is walking you home. It's completely dismissive of the fact of intimate partner violence, which is off the charts on college campuses as well. We need to have a discussion about why men are raping, and it's not because women are drinking.
Well, why is that?
I think that they feel they can get away with it. And you know what's so sad? It's 2013 and they are getting away with it. I cannot believe the statistics are so shocking, and I cannot believe we are still victim blaming. I think people's responses to the statistics show how alive and well victim blaming is.
Well, and the fact is the statistics for both drinking and date rape on college campuses has increased. I mean, that's what ought to be scaring parents. Look, I think any parent sending a child to college these days ought to not just listen to the tour guide who gives you the campus tour and talks about all the wonderful things about the campus. They should be going in and looking at the crime statistics on that campus, which are finally, no matter what college you pick, they're going to be a lot higher than you expect, and making sure that whatever school their child picks, they know that and they take every precaution to make sure they're not a victim of it. Because you're right, it doesn't mean that the victim is at fault. But look, there are bad people out there, and they're going to do bad things. And sometimes it's rape, and you should be doing whatever you can to arm somebody not to become a victim.
So is it the college's burden to, I mean, when you go to college, presumably you're 18, you're of age.
Yeah.
Is it the college's job to protect you from rape more than they're doing so now, which according to this report is Not very much.
Sure, I think colleges should be doing more, but I mean, look, 18 is not old enough to drink anywhere in this country. So if you're not enforcing those laws, that's one thing. Maybe of age for consensual sex, but rape, as we know, is not consensual
The colleges
sex.
have a huge responsibility, though. I mean, I remember when I was in college, just the other day, a few years ago, cheating was such a big deal. We knew that we couldn't cheat. If we cheated, we would be kicked out. We need to have the same attitude. I feel like men are getting this message that universities don't want to deal with it. They're going to help you cover it up. They want to cover it up. It's bad press for them. And we need to change this attitude. A C average is not acceptable.
And why not focus more on men and educating men about what they need to do? Really, men need to understand that what you're looking for is not to just hear no. What you're looking for is an affirmative yes. And if you're not really trying to get an affirmative yes, then what you're doing may not, in fact, be consensual. We also need to give men information about what you can do when you see a buddy of yours doing something that he shouldn't be doing. We need to arm people with information, not just women, but also men.
And I think everybody around this table would agree on that. But what is wrong with adding the part about warning college women of the statistics that show a link between drinking and sexual assault?
What I think is that you can warn both men and women about it. I mean, the statistics say that 80% of both men and women who are involved in sexual assault have been drinking. So why not tell both men and women, hey, when you are inebriated, your decision processing skills are not the best for men, and for women, you become physically unable to protect yourself, even at a more great degree.
And what else? Welcome to the panel, by the way. What else should colleges be doing to protect women that they're not doing? I mean, do they have to have armed guards in front of every dorm room?
They really have to be prosecuting these perpetrators accurately. And I feel like it's almost condescending to have this approach towards women, like, oh, if you get drunk, you might get raped. Really? Thanks. If I get drunk, a lot of things might happen. But that is not my responsibility for getting raped. I mean, it's good to be told, but the focus shouldn't be on that.
But of these women who are raped, 72% of them admittedly say that they were intoxicated when it happened. So I do think you have to look at the rate, the link between the rape and the drinking.
If you drink, you should be expect to be raped?
No, but what you should be warned of is that if you are getting very, very drunk, you should be worried about when you're walking at home alone, not just getting raped, also getting mugged, anything.
Getting hit by a car in the middle of the road.
Exactly.
Well, what message are we telling the men? Are we giving them any message?
We're giving them a message.
Look, there ought to be zero tolerance for this on any college, frankly, in society, right? There ought to be zero tolerance for this. But I think there's a coarsening of the culture on our college campuses because they reflect the larger culture. And there's a coarsening of the culture out there. And so I just don't think it's sad, but I don't find it overly surprising that we're seeing these numbers.
And what do you do about, that? I mean, college campuses and authorities can't be held responsible, I shouldn't think, for coarsening
college
the culture.
Campuses have become some of the most valueless places in American society. They teach that anything goes, everything's great, and whatever you want to do, you be it, okay? They teach very few values. They're moral relativism laboratories, and I think you're seeing what kind of society springs from that.
But beyond the values question, I mean, there are organizations like Men Can Stop Rape and A Call to Men that specifically focus on educating men around what their responsibilities are as men to not perpetrate violence against women. That's really where we need to have the majority of the focus.
All right, that's it. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay or at To the Contrary. From college safety to defining success.
Contrary to popular belief, men are more likely than women to define having a loving marriage and raising children as an integral part of having it all. That, according to a study released this week, surveying professional men and women about how they approach and view success. Almost 80% of men, but only 66% of women, equate having it all with being in a strong, loving marriage. A greater percentage of men include having children in their definition of success, and the study found men now value work-life balance as much as women.
Is it a shout out that as employers and institutions are thinking about their policies, not to just think of them in the context of women, and that, everyone, whether it's you're dealing with your children or you're dealing with your aging parents, there is a very large sandwich population out there that are looking for flexibility. When we ask them about the importance of parental leave policies, as a corporate perk 56% of women rated it as important, but only 36% of men. That's a 20-point difference. So perhaps fewer men just don't expect that their employer is going to deliver on that benefit.
The study also found that women are more likely to expect they'll make a number of career and job transitions on their professional paths.
So it sounds a little bit like this study found that roles are reversing, where men are expecting marriage and family as part of the success package, more of them, many more of them, and women are saying, geez, if I want to get ahead, it means no marriage, no family.
Well, there haven't been a lot of studies done on how men feel about these things, so it's sort of hard to compare to how men felt before versus how they feel now. But as far as how women feel about these issues now, I think that this is a result of society saying things like, lean in. We were just talking about that, Sheryl Sandberg, and saying, girl power, more power to you if you want to have a career and you don't want to have family. And I think
she
that's what
has both. I mean, I'm not comparing her to
Sure.
the average woman. She's, a multi-gazillionaire, but part of her message is not don't have kids, it's have kids and participate more at work.
Sure, but it can be difficult as a woman to do that. Let's be realistic here. If you're going to get pregnant and have a child, you have to take off work to be able to do that. And then moving forward, it becomes more difficult because you have to take care of the baby. And I know you can talk more about this. I don't actually have kids. But it is a difficulty for women in their careers. If you have kids, that's just a fact.
I think, actually, I was really surprised by the findings, and I thought that they were fantastic. I thought it was completely reflective of the fact that men are more involved and invested in their families and the caretaking roles that were really kind of the only option women had for centuries. But I think it's also reflective of the fact that today in America, more women are the primary breadwinners in their families. So I think it's great. Work-life balance, I definitely think there should be more flex hours and such to accommodate working mothers, but I think that's a different issue.
Well, not only to accommodate working mothers, but to accommodate working fathers. I think that's a big takeaway for me from these survey findings, is that men want to have the flexibility to also be able to spend time with their children. And what I think is important to note here is that women aren't just saying that we are totally rejecting the idea of marriage per se because we don't want to have a partner in their lives. They're saying it's really more important to them to have someone who's kind, who's loving, who's supportive as their partner. They don't necessarily need to have a ring on it.
But one other possible interpretation, and the one that the city folks told us in that interview, was that women just don't expect corporations to provide family-friendly benefits, and so they're thinking, if I want to get ahead, it means no family. What do you think about that?
Well, I think even with benefits, I just think at the end of the day, sometimes meetings go long and they don't move, recitals because your meeting goes long. And so I think, even if there's flexibility, at the end of the day, if you're going to be a senior executive somewhere, it is tough not to be on call and be on this all the time. And so I think, women maybe more than men understand the challenges there. But I think it's also something I think men are much more engaged with their families maybe now than in years past, or at least sharing that load. I think
younger men.
Though my dad was extremely engaged with all that. But I think you also have more women today who aren't married or who don't have families, and not necessarily by choice because they wanted to move up the career ladder, but that is what's happened. And so I think you're seeing maybe more of a balance coming from that, too.
But I do see to a certain extent that it is by choice. I mean, I was recently married, but we don't have kids, and we're not planning to have kids anytime soon. And it has everything to do with the career ladder thing. I know that if I do that, then it is going to disrupt my career, or it's going to disrupt his career, and that's something that we have to take into account there when determining whether we're going to have them or not, or when we're going to have them.
But do you see having kids ultimately as part of your definition of success?
No, I personally don't think it contributes to the definition of success. Is it something that I could see as being fulfilling? Yes, but I wouldn't define it as something that has to do with success. I see success, and I think most people in my generation see success as specifically something that has to do with your career. And that could be what we're seeing here, too. When asked about success, they probably associated that with career versus...
I know lots of moms who think raising their children well are just as important as any career they're ever going to have, and I would think they're right.
But you know what I feel is a big problem that we're not talking about? That people and women and their partners are accommodating corporate America instead of corporate America accommodating women, and the fact that more women are in the workplace, and men probably didn't need flex hours the way we need flex hours. But also the great thing is I have flex hours, and when I'm at the park these days, I see more dads there than I think anybody in my mom's generation ever did. And in fact, a lot of my friends and family, when I got married, were shocked at how much my husband does. And I was like, well, I wouldn't have married him or reproduced with him if I knew he was not going to help with the load. It's a huge load.
Now, what about, but a lot of companies, especially that Yahoo and Marissa
Meyer, yeah,
she said, forget about flex time. We need FaceTime.
And it was sad because she's a working mom.
Right.
But, you know, I also heard that she did that not because of her approach to working from home, but more so because the company was in shambles when she came in, and she needed to get it up the ground. And guess what? Profits are surging. It's doing very well. It's been rebranded. So, you know, hallelujah to Marissa Meyer. I also didn't agree with, you know, she didn't want to take any maternity leave. I'm sure she has a lot of nannies at home. It's a little bit different. But you'll also notice that she didn't comment on it. She just went to work.
Yeah. All right, behind the headlines, An American Bride in Kabul. This autobiographical memoir is the story of a young American Jewish woman who fell in love with an Afghani man and returned with him to his home country. Feminist author Phyllis Chesler says there's a message in her story.
He was very westernized in the West, but when he returned home to claim his place in the scheme of things, given that his family was powerful, he had to follow their customs. He probably hoped that I would adjust. This was madness.
When Chesler arrived in Afghanistan in 1961 with her new husband, her passport was confiscated. She faced the repressive norms all women face in Afghan society. Chesler says she had no idea that she would become a prisoner of his family.
I became a citizen of no country and the property of a polygamous Afghan family. And by the way, my very good guy Afghan husband, like many, many, many Muslim men who marry Western women, he didn't mention after a 2.5-year courtship, he never mentioned his father had 3 wives and 21 children, and that I would be expected to live with my mother-in-law. What? And that I couldn't go out on my own.
After just a few months, Chesler decided to return home. She tried to escape to the American embassy, but officials couldn't help her, not without her passport. So she sought help elsewhere and found it from the wife of a German diplomat who arranged a flight out. But Chesler fell extremely sick with hepatitis.
At the last moment, my father-in-law came and he very carefully and tenderly said, well, I hear about your little plan, and I think it's better if you leave on an Afghan visa for reasons of health. And he gave me a visa. And I understand in retrospect that he probably didn't know why his son, for whom he had such high hopes, had brought home a Jewish girl from America.
Whatever the means for her escape, Chesler was overjoyed to be back home.
I had to fight it out in America when the State Department, the American State Department said, well, your visa is up, you have to go back to Afghanistan. I said, oh no, I'll chain myself to the Statue of Liberty. I'm not leaving.
Chesler says the experience shaped who she is today, an ardent feminist. She's written numerous books and campaigns against the treatment of women in the Arab world. But some feminists, liberals, and critics bristle at her strident condemnation.
Feminists have understandably been very reluctant to finger point because they don't want to be accused of being racists or being Islamophobes, and therefore they've lost an extraordinary opportunity to make common cause with Muslim feminists and Muslim dissidents with whom I work who are anti-fundamentalism.
In her memoir, she writes, I have offended everyone. A Boston Globe critic says, this is true, but Chesler does not shy away from her committed attack on Islamic society.
I'm a second-wave feminist leader, and I think the difference is that I'm certainly anti-racist, but I'm not a multicultural relativist. And that means I don't think all cultures are equal, I don't think it's okay to stone women or to force them into polygamous marriages when they're 8 or 12 years old.
So, is it racist in your mind to talk the way she does about Islamic culture?
You know, with all due respect to Chesler's story and her journey, I really think that the plight of Afghan women and girls is something that is so real and something that belongs really at the top of U.S. foreign policy priorities. So I really don't understand what her goal is, because I feel like her story, the only thing it really does effectively is perpetuate negative, scary stereotypes of, you know, the angry, scary Muslim man and, you know, all the problems over there and in the Muslim world, and is completely dismissive of the fact that you cannot generalize all Muslim countries, all Muslim men and all Muslim women.
Well, I agree that you can't generalize, but I do think that I just was in Turkey this past summer, and it's got to be one of the most westernized countries. It's Muslim, but there was no doubt that men ran that society much more than women did. And so I think drawing attention to it in the right way is important. It doesn't mean that you're casting a stone at everybody, but it does put out there out front. And there's nothing better than a personal story to make people engage with these issues and make it be for real for them, especially when it's being told by an American.
But I feel like Chesler is casting a stone. And also, I felt like her story was kind of the Cliff Note, PG version of Betty Mahmoudi and Not Without My Daughter, which was released, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s, which was exactly the same story about an American woman who got married to a very westernized Iranian man, and then they went back there right at the height of the Iranian Revolution, and, you know, her passport was taken away and whatnot. But she was trapped for much longer. I mean, 10 weeks almost seems like a baby moon in comparison. So I feel like this story has a lot of echoes of a story we've already.
But tell me what's wrong with, because, you know, you're absolutely right, and the State Department is probably continuing what Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice before her started, really targeting Afghan women, trying to help them have more freedom, have some laws that are in their favor. Why is it so bad if she points out her experience? Again, I haven't read every word she's written. I don't know what words she uses, but just to tell the story.
I think it's fine for her to tell her story, and I think that it's going to, you know, sell a lot of her books. She's being so sensational about it. I feel like we need a more balanced discourse about this was my experience, but there's so much good work being done here. I mean, let's not forget that about 60% of Afghan women have medical degrees. They made up about 70% of teachers in their country. And then, you know, over 20 years of war, civil war, the U.S. occupation, you know, the Russian invasion. So much has happened to this society, and Herat is very different from Kabul. Kabul is very different from, you know, let's say Peshawar, the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. So I wish she was almost a little bit more inclusive and academic and factual about. I mean, I have been a feminist policy analyst in Washington, D.C. for a decade. I've worked on Nobel Peace Prize nominated Afghan women campaigns, and let me tell you, there's a lot of good work being done, and the entire attitude isn't, oh, we're fine in America and let us help, you know, the brown women over there. I mean, let's be real, folks. 2013, American women are still fighting for.
Well, she also is telling a story that also happened decades ago, and so I think that we have to draw attention to that now there is a lot of good work being done. But that may not have been the case when she was there. We're talking about the 60s.
I feel like she doesn't have that tone. And like, oh, this is my story. Maybe things are better now. I almost feel like.
And I also haven't read the book. I couldn't point to the tone or all the words, but what I have read about the book, I just like, again, to point out that she's not talking about something that happened in the last 10 years. She's talking about something that happened decades ago. That was her experience.
But I've traveled widely in Islamic countries, Turkey, Egypt, Lebanon, you know, it goes on. And I see a lot of women there, or I have met a lot of women there who are wearing, you know, the black outfits and following their husbands and not allowed to go out alone unescorted.
I definitely think.
And they tell me that Islam is liberating to them, and that does bother me. Quickly, because we have 20 seconds, but what's your response?
There could be a whole show on this, and I write so much about this issue. I just think that we have to be careful that we don't generalize. I also think we have to acknowledge the fact that, of course, there's problems. There's problems with sexism even here. I feel like
we talk about that a lot, by the way.
I feel like we live in the the confrontation with patriarchy is something that women's rights movements all over the world are still trying to conquer. So it's very real.
Great ending note. That's it for this edition To the Contrary. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Bay and at To the Contrary, and visit our website, pbs.org/To the Contrary, where the discussion continues. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, please join us next time. So, yeah, that is a whole thing.
She get wrapped up in my mic at one point.
No, I think that she wrote about it in memoir. So it wasn't, I mean, I'm sure she's written other.
But you're right. It's been so far.
I was just going to say, like,